Welcome back inside the den. Hey, it's been a while. It's been over a month since we last chatted with you guys. A lot has happened within the Nevada basketball world. We're here to talk about it. And with me, as always, is Chris Murray. It's been a month since we've done the pod, but how has that month been?
It's been good. We had Christmas, New Year's. I went to Vancouver. You went to Chile.
Chile, got to represent.
There you go. So, we're well rested. We've been back at the grind here for a couple of weeks, and obviously a lot has transpired with the Nevada men's basketball team.
Yes, new year, new focus. I'm excited, just on a personal note, just to have another year of podcasting, storytelling alongside you, Chris. It should be a good one. But if we were to jump into Nevada basketball, it's been a month. Before we left, it was all good vibes. We last taped right before their Nevada basketball's win at the Diamond Head Classic. Felt like a rather high note in outside of NCAA tournament wins, but in program history to go out to Hawaii and get some good victories out there. However, they enter conference play and they run into some tough opponents in Boise State and San Diego State and get run through. It's the Mountain West. It's tough play, but a rather shocking loss to Wyoming. Made that 3 games in a row. So what went wrong there? Could you pinpoint one thing?
I mean, during the stretch, I think, of 3 straight losses, it came down to the defense. I think the defense was strong against Boise State, gave up too many offensive rebounds. I think you look at the San Diego State game, the defense got even worse and gave up even more offensive rebounds. The Aztecs 20 offensive rebounds in that game. And then that game at Wyoming, the defense just didn't show up. It was one of Nevada's worst defensive efforts of the last 4 or 5 years, giving up 98 points to a Wyoming team that had a sub-200 Ken Palm offense, a team that had not scored more than 80 points against a Division I opponent. So I think you lose at home to Boise State. You don't want to lose at home, but that was a close game. Those things happen. You lose on the road at San Diego State. Nevada's never won there since moving to the Mountain West. Those things happen. I think it was the loss at Wyoming that was really, really troubling, because if you want to win a Mountain West championship, if you want to take that step to being great, to be that team that can cut down some nets before the Mountain West tournament starts, you can't really afford to be losing to lower level competition. I know it's on the road. I know it's at Laramie. I know Wyoming has had Nevada's number. I think 8 straight wins over the Wolfpack. That's a little bit alarming. That was a bad loss. So how are you going to make up for it? Obviously, they come back home this week and they beat Colorado State, a ranked team, to kind of get back in that mix in the Mountain West, sitting at 3-3 through their first 6 games. Now a big game against New Mexico. But very clearly, why did Nevada lose 3 straight games? That defense would have been so spectacular in non-conference play, was not good during those 3 games, except for maybe the Boise State game. But it got right back on track against Colorado State, a very strong defensive effort. It just shows you how important Nevada's defense is to this team, because the Wolfpack is probably not going to outscore you in a lot of games. A couple times they've done that. TCU, I think the offense was good. Georgia Tech, the offense was good. I mean, against Colorado State, the offense was good. But that's not Nevada's DNA. They don't really want games to get into the mid-80s because that's not how they're built to win games. They're built to win games in the mid-70s, playing great defense, riding their 2 guards, getting to the free throw line. And that formula, came back against Colorado State, but it did kind of go missing there for those 3 games and those 3 losses.
Yeah, the game against Wyoming feels like an outlier, just of how well that Wyoming team shot.
Mm-hmm.
They were just making all sorts of threes and really were effective around the perimeter. And if you watch Nevada, that they'll yield shots from the outside, but that calling card is, just play formidable defense, not allow easy buckets. I'd say those losses to San Diego State and Boise State are alarming because it looks like the losses that they've taken at the hands of, last year Arizona State, years past, and Muss's era to Florida, teams that can out-physical them. Obviously, these are different teams, different years and whatnot, but the path forward, if the ceiling of this team is to, obviously make it into the NCAA tournament, maybe another first 4, you're going to run into teams that have physical guys.
Mm-hmm.
So it remains to be seen if, Nevada can match that physicality. I think the game against Colorado State was a good start. They've definitely rebounded, against Wyoming and Colorado State and making it, they've won the rebound battle, but, by a slim margin. But, the teams that you really want them to have success against, your Boise States, your San Diego States, have big bodies. And they haven't been able to match the physicality. Again, that might change. Tylen Pope has come on, just had his best game in silver and blue against Colorado State, and that certainly changes things because he is a presence, he is a rim protector. Even if he's a 6'8", 6'7" guy, he has those hops. But you need guys that need to scrap with some of the bigger guys that you'll see in the NCAA tournament.
Well, that's the interesting thing about the Mountain West is you do get a variety of different teams. So San Diego State and Boise State, they're going to try and out-physical you. They're going to be very grimy on defense. They're going to be very tough on you. They're going to probably foul a lot, and you're going to have to play through that. And then you have games against teams like New Mexico, Colorado State, Utah State. Those teams are more built to be great offensively. So how are you going to slow down a little bit of their tempo, kind of pull them into the kind of game that you want to play? Obviously, Nevada did that against Colorado State. We'll see if that happens at New Mexico on Sunday. And then you've got some other teams that are, more like slow down the game and just hope that they can keep it close, like an Air Force and a Fresno State. They want to try and shrink the number of possessions, play defense, hit some threes, and maybe stick in the game. So every game is a different challenge. Certainly, the physical games that Nevada played, the Boise State and the San Diego State, they didn't pass that challenge, right? They weren't quite, strong enough up front. They were out, kind of manhandled in those games. That's not to say that will continue to happen. I mean, TCU is a very similar team to that, and that didn't happen in that TCU game. But yeah, forecasting forward in terms of NCAA tournament, you are going to play really athletic, physical teams if you get into the big dance. Right now, if you look at ESPN's bracketology, Nevada in the next four out, despite being 16-4, I think that speaks a lot to the non-conference schedule, which wasn't super strong. I mean, outside of the wins over TCU and Washington's really struggled in the Pac-12. That's going to probably turn into a quad 2 game. There's not a lot of meat on that bone, so Nevada needs to be very good in the Mountain West. It probably needs to finish in the top 4, certainly at least in the top 5 if it's going to get an at-large berth. And now sitting at 3-3, they're right around 6th place in the conference. That's not going to work. So they're going to have to continue to play better. And there are a lot of really challenging games ahead. I think this game Sunday at the Pit is a huge opportunity. If you go to the Pit and win, not only do you make up for that loss to Wyoming, you make up for that loss to Boise State. Now you've gone into a top 3 or 4 venue, and you've gotten a road win, which kind of helps erase your home loss that you already have on the ledger. So that's a huge opportunity for Nevada to try and get back into the Mountain West title race. But if they lose, and they're probably going to be a 7 or 8 point underdog, then you're at 3-4, almost halfway through conference play. And then probably the Mountain West overall regular season title is out the window. You almost have to run the table. I think your eventual winner is going to be something around 14-4, maybe 13-5. So if you're sitting at 3-4 after the first 7 games, the whole goal this season was to win a Mountain West regular season championship. That was the next step for this team. I'm not going to say they're going to be out of contention if they lose on Sunday. It's going to be exceptionally difficult for them to win a Mountain West regular season title if they don't win this game in a couple days.
Kind of circling back to the out of conference schedule, yeah, it was soft scheduling, and fans will point and be like, "Well, teams don't want to come to Reno." I think it should be on this Nevada team to go out and schedule tougher opponents on the road. It may seem daunting, but if you schedule these things, it prepares your team more down the line, and you get more respect from the committee if you're scheduling some Power 5 opponents versus just Fresno Pacific, right? So I don't know. It's just a better path forward. It's better for your program overall to schedule tougher games. New Mexico played a St. Mary's team and lost, but it didn't have an adverse effect on their season, seeing as how right now they're in the midst of a 4-game winning streak against some top Mountain West opponents in San Diego State, Boise State, and they've won all 4 of those games by double digits.
I think if you're Nevada, you'd probably counter by saying, well, you went on the road and you beat a Pac-12, so you went into a Pac-12 venue and beat Washington, and neutral site you beat a Big 12 team in TCU, neutral site you beat an ACC team in Georgia Tech. I will say that when the schedule was released, it looked like it was pretty soft for a team that had at-large aspirations coming off an NCAA tournament berth. I would say that was probably the case the last 2 years as well, and things ended up being okay in terms of non-conference ranked schedule. Certainly this year it did not turn out okay in terms of, you're hoping that maybe a lot of the teams you play from the West Coast Conference play up, and those end up being quad 2 games rather than quad 3 or 4 games. So I would agree. You look at Colorado State, you look at Boise State, you look at San Diego State, you look at Utah State. Those are teams that played 5, 6, 7 quad 1 and quad 2 games at a conference, which not only helps that resume, but helps prepare you for the caliber of team you're going to face in conference. Now, one of the reasons Nevada can kind of maybe face a little bit of a lighter non-conference schedule and still build that at-large resume is because of how good the Mountain West is. You look at Eric Musselman's 4 years at Nevada, never played a Mountain West team that was ranked in the top 25 when that game was played. You look at Steve Alford's now 4.5 years at Nevada. He, at this point, has played 7 top 25 teams in Mountain West play. So the conference is so much better. Maybe that's why they eased up a little bit, because you don't want to have, 11, 12 losses on your resume heading in trying to get an at-large berth. But the Mountain West is going to get at least 4 teams in the NCAA tournament, maybe 5, super outside chance of 6. Will Nevada end up in that top 4 or 5 is the big question. You look at the non-conference resume, it's probably 5th out of those 6 teams, ahead of only New Mexico, who didn't really do much in non-conference. They did play St. Mary's, but they lost that game. No quad 1 wins for New Mexico in non-conference. For Nevada, currently 2, depending on how that Washington game plays out. So I think with what Nevada did in non-conference, it is going to have to finish in the top 4 of the Mountain West to get an at-large bid. So that's kind of the goal moving forward, and finishing in the top 4 of this conference is not going to be easy. It's a very, very good conference at the top.
It's tough, and it's a battle every night. But we talk about resume builders. We can kind of talk about, a good victory over Colorado State, 24th ranked in the country. Obviously, Nevada was favored in this one, speaking to the strength of the Mountain West and how hard it is to go on the road and get a victory. But specifically in that game, I felt like the team came out and had an edge to it. Certainly with the backcourt, and the front court obviously took over at the end with Lucas and Blackshear, but the tone was set by the likes of Coleman, Pope, and Davidson, that were just really taking it to Colorado State's backcourt. So that's it was good to see that. Kind of hints at Alford's getting at them and making them practice harder and more intently, and they at least have some understanding as to what has been plaguing them in the 3-game skid. But overall, that that intense and energy throughout the game kind of propelled them to a win. Obviously, it helps when your star duo of Blackshear and Lucas take over. And that's exactly what happened in the second half. And I think they are a hard team to beat when those two are on. And Lucas has turned it on for that the majority of the game, really. But Blackshear turned it on in the second half and kind of showed why he's a potential NBA draft pick, just with his size and ability, and his ability to hit turnaround jumpers in the mid range.
Yeah, I mean, 48 points between those two guys. That's a lot of points. When you get 48 points between your stars, you're almost never going to lose. I think that shows Nevada's potential. If those two guys are going and they play defense, they can be a top 25 team. They can compete for a Mountain West championship. They can win an NCAA tournament game. Now, the problem is that's not going to happen all 18 games in non-conference. And as much as Lucas and Blackshear were going really well in that game, that was still like a 5 or 6 point game for most of the second half, with Colorado State shooting terribly from 3 and sub 40 from the field. So, you're not going to get that caliber of game out of those guys every single time out. That's just an unrealistic ask. But when they do play like that, Nevada's a very dangerous team. They can certainly beat any team in the Mountain West. They could go and win a Mountain West tournament. And I do think if they get to an NCAA tournament, if those two guys play like that, they can win games. But I think if you're Steve Alford, you have to be happy with the defense, because you hit adversity. There are 2 ways your team can go. It can fold, like we saw 2 years ago, or it can try and rise above. And Jared Lucas said their practices leading up to that game, some of the best he's seen all season. And that defense really did lock down and held a very talented Colorado State offense below 40% shooting. Isaiah Stevens only 8 points, the second time in the last 2 years he's been held to single digits. 4 of 16 from the field. His 25% shooting, the 5th worst in his college career, over 130 games. So that has to be the most impressive thing that you saw from your team. But you're going to have to try and get that when you face these better teams in the Mountain West. And I think an even bigger challenge at the Pit on Sunday, because that's a more talented offensive team with better post players, and you're on the road. So we'll see if they can follow that up. But just getting that win does help stabilize the season a little bit. Had they lost that one and then going to the Pit, things could have unraveled. So that win over Colorado State, arguably the biggest of the season, maybe even bigger than beating TCU in a neutral site.
Yeah, like the defensive end, the effort was there, and they did quite well to defend the paint and the mid range jumpers, and just the bigs did their job and fought for boards. But I think that Colorado State had their chances. They had the threes that were open. The shot just wasn't dropping, and that's basketball. Sometimes sometimes it goes in, sometimes it doesn't. But this team does yield 3-pointers. It's kind of what they do. But they have a game against New Mexico, and they have 4 players currently that average more than 13 points a game. You got Mashburn, House, Dent, and Toppin. Now, Toppin's probably not the greatest 3-point shooter, but those other 3 can light it up. So that will be a challenge on Sunday. Can they limit that? Because, like you said, New Mexico is a team that wants to score in the 80s or 90s. They can outrun you. So if Nevada's going to win this game at the pit, and it's a big game, they need to drag the Lobos down into the mud and make this, a 50, 60 point output.
Well, I think the transition defense is going to be huge in this game. You look at New Mexico, 5th fastest tempo in the NCAA. There's only 2 Mountain West teams that play top 180 tempo. The other one, Utah State, which is around 105. So no team in the Mountain West plays like New Mexico in terms of get Jalen House the ball, run, get to the 3-point line. Very talented guards. Donovan Dent is fantastic, and he's their 3rd best guard. They've got 2 legitimate, 6'9", 6'10" post players, which most Mountain West schools don't have. So they're also a very good offensive rebounding team. To me, this is the best offense in the Mountain West. This is the team playing the best basketball in the Mountain West. This is the team that currently has the best home court advantage in the Mountain West. Beat San Diego State by 18 at home. Beat Utah State by double digits at home, beat Wyoming by 17 at home. This is an exceptionally big challenge. If Nevada goes on the road and loses this, there's no egg on the face. Most teams are going to lose at the pit. But given that they have that loss to Wyoming and Boise State, they do need to have a couple of makeup games, and this is one opportunity to try and get that makeup. But I think transition defense is huge in this game. I think defensive rebounding is huge in this game because Nevada's defensive rebounding hasn't really been very good the last 4 games, even against Colorado State. And I think Nevada's guards have to outplay New Mexico's guards because I think New Mexico is so much better in the front court. I think it's going to have an advantage there over the Wolfpack. So how do you kind of neutralize that advantage? You need your 2-star players to go and outplay their star players. That is what happened when Nevada won in the pit last year. Jared Lucas had 28 points. Keenan Blackshear at the game-winning bucket. Those 2 outplayed Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn Jr. I think they only beat him by 1 point, but they were far more efficient. They hit like 7 3-pointers to New Mexico's star guards going 2 and 9 from 3. So Nevada has the capability of winning this game, but a lot's going to have to go right, and it starts with that transition defense. If New Mexico gets the offense going and starts running and doesn't have to run his half-court sets, Nevada's going to be in major trouble. So it's going to be a really fun game to watch. I mean, Steve Alford, 3-0 at the pit since becoming Nevada's head coach, and 8-0 against his former team since becoming the Wolfpack's head coach. So he's had a little bit of ownage over his former team, and I'm sure a lot of people in that community want to see the Lobos beat Coach Alford at least once, here in the near future.
Yeah, Nevada's currently on a 9-game winning streak against the Lobos, so kind of a one-sided affair these past few years. So that's kind of like speaks well to like maybe this team just plays better against New Mexico. But going back to matchups on Sunday, I think more pressure will be put on the plates of Trey Coleman and Daniel Foster, right? Because those guards are going to be really good. And like if you're looking at a weak link on the defensive end, we love him, but it's Jared Lucas as a defender. So they need to get some good matchups, and I think Foster and Coleman can be those guys to like kind of step up. Yes, would you not like to see Lucas on a taller guy? Maybe not, but I think that game begins and ends with how well are New Mexico's guards playing in the game. So interesting matchup. Pitt's always a tough place. I know Mike's gonna go out there and experience it, but all-time favorite moment at the pit. I think we're gonna be unanimous here.
Oh, the major comeback.
The major comeback.
I think it was 14 points down with about a minute and 5 seconds to go.
Yeah.
I don't think Nevada wants to be in that situation.
No.
I don't think they want to be in that dire of a situation. Craig Neal, who's Nevada's associate head coach, was the head coach of that team. So I'd be curious to know his thoughts and remembrance of that game. But yeah, I mean, New Mexico's guards are really, really good. Like Donovan Dent is their number 3 guard behind House and Mashburn. And if you put Donovan Dent on his own team in the Mountain West and said, go be our top scorer, he would give you 18 points per game efficiently.
Yeah.
So you can't really hide anybody on defense when you're playing those 3 guards. And then Toppin is going to be the Mountain West Freshman of the Year, already an NBA draft prospect. And then Nelly Jr. Joseph, who's a transfer from Iona, was like 20-10 last year. He hasn't been quite as productive because there's a lot of talented players, but he's a very good player as well. He's a really big body. Nevada's, they don't have to play a perfect game, but pretty close. So there's like this metric on barttorvik.com, which is a statistical website that I really like using. They give a game score, 0 all the way up to 100 for every game that you play. Nevada probably needs to play like a 95 or above to win that game. Maybe like low 90s will get it done. Maybe New Mexico has an off shooting night, but when you're looking at New Mexico, there's not a lot of weaknesses because this team didn't play defense 2 years ago at all under Coach Pitino. Last year, they were still below average for Mountain West schools on defense. This year, they're one of the Mountain West best defenses, a top 30 Ken Baum defense. We've talked about the offense, so it's a very, very talented team. So I think it's going to be a great game. The 2 games last year were fantastic. The one at Lawler Event Center, double overtime Wolfpack win. Looked like that game was over in the first overtime. Tied with less than 20 seconds to go. Daniel Foster takes an elbow, hits a free throw. Will Baker 2 free throws, and they win by 3. And then the game at the pit, New Mexico probably thought it had it won, and Keenan Blackshear hits that probably 15-footer that hangs on the rim for about 2 seconds. So I think New Mexico probably feels like it's owed one against Nevada. But I'm sure, the Lobos are looking at the Wolfpack and saying, this is going to be a really tough team to beat as well because Trey Coleman is playing better. So you kind of have that third guard. They are a very good defensive team. KJ Himes can do things in the post. Nick Davidson's a good player. I think the biggest thing for Nevada, they haven't gotten a lot from the bench over the last month or so, and I think they need more from the bench. They probably need 15 to 20 points from the bench in this one. So Tylen Pope, this isn't a perfect matchup for him. He's listed at 6'6". You're going against 2 6'9" guys. That's who are well built. That's not going to be easy. I think Hunter McIntosh could be big in this game. He probably needs to chip in anywhere from 6 to 10 points. Daniel Foster is going to get his 20 minutes. I don't think he can be a scoreless 20 minutes like he can be in some games. I think he's going to have to knock down a couple shots. He's shown that he's a more capable offensive player this year. Tyler Rollison we didn't see in the game against Colorado State. He was on the bench. Nevada used only an 8-person rotation. So if Nevada's going to win this game, I think it needs 15 to 20 from the bench. They've got some capable guys. They just haven't been highly productive offensively. I know Coach Alford's happy with how they've defended as reserves. But, this game is probably going to get into the 80s. So how is Nevada going to get up to 80 points?
Yeah, it's a reasonable question because, this when Lucas and Blackshear are going, you reasonably see like this team scoring more than 80. But it's that third option that really needs to step up. And McIntosh has been that in spurts. Trey Coleman has been hitting more threes as of late, which is a good development, like you said. But it's ultimately like, where are those other scoring options? Nick Davidson can be that, right? But I think as the season goes along, it's just something like the Mountain West. It's always evolving. The team will look different. Like 3-4 weeks from now, it might be totally different. They may be clicking on all cylinders, and you're like, oh, this team is the team to beat. Because I mean, just a month ago, I remember looking at the net, and New Mexico beat reporter Jeff Grammer was talking to some of his followers, and they're like, oh, why is everyone ranked so much highly? And then he was just like, they're playing better than us right now. They're playing better. And fast forward a month, and New Mexico's looking like the team outside of Utah State, the team to beat in the Mountain West.
And Boise State as well. I mean, Boise State in non-conference wasn't very good. Now, they played a really strong non-conference schedule, but 4 losses, a couple that were, like Butler and Virginia Tech. You don't necessarily want to lose to them. Washington State, which is a solid Pac-12 team. But, you got to evolve with your team. You got to get better.
Yeah.
If you're not getting better, you're going to get swallowed up by this league because some of these teams are going to start playing better. And you've seen Boise State take it up a notch. You've seen UNLV take it up a notch until their loss to Air Force. Right. That's a very Jekyll and Hyde kind of team. New Mexico is certainly taking it up a notch. Colorado State has fallen back, and that's why they're struggling. Nevada initially fell back at the start of Mountain West play, and that's why they've struggled sitting there at 500. Colorado State below 500 when it was as high as number 13 in the nation. So you have to be on your A game against the majority of opponents in the Mountain West. Maybe Air Force, maybe Fresno State, maybe Wyoming. You can play a little bit of a substandard game and get away with it. But Nevada did that at Wyoming, and it didn't work. So It's very, very difficult to get through this league without taking 3, 4, 5 losses. The great thing is that they did so well as a whole in the non-conference play that they're going to get rewarded with that with 4 or 5 different NCAA tournament teams. But they're 7th in the net as a conference, so I don't think the Mountain West is getting 6 teams. I think 5 might even be a little bit of a reach. I think it's probably 4, and if it's only 4, like we said, Nevada's non-conference schedule not as strong as some others in the Mountain West. The Wolfpack probably has to finish in that top 4, which means ideally you go perfect at home, a 9-0. That's not going to happen, and you go somewhere around 4-5, 5-4 on the road. So there's going to be a ton of really fun games coming up. I think this one at the Pit should be one of the most fun of the entire season because of the history between, Coach Alford used to be there, because of how the last 2 games last year went, and just because of how much talent there is going to be on the floor. I think there could be multiple NBA guys on the floor. I mean, I think Mashburn has a shot, Toppin has a shot, Keenan Blackshear has a shot. I don't know that, Jared Lucas or Jalen House are quite there, but they're certainly going to play professional basketball for a long time. So it's going to be a very talented court. And, we'll see who goes and plays the best 40 minutes.
Yeah, Trevor, the SID for Nevada basketball, was telling us the other day they're kind of limiting spots for media because there's multiple scouts. And he said it's going to be like that the rest of the year. Kind of speaks to the conference and the talent within the conference. But, yeah, it's an exciting slate. These next 2 months, it's going to be fun. You got to love college basketball around February, March. It's just there's nothing like it. And, of course, we'll see how Nevada does and if they finish within that top 4. This team does, outside of the first 4 and the MTEs, they kind of showed up for tournament play, even last year when they went to the Caribbean and took on a talented Kansas State squad and probably should have won in a kind of a thrilling game that went to overtime there. But, you'd like to see them be clicking by the time the Mountain West tournament comes along in Vegas because it's been a minute since we've seen them kind of perform there. Obviously, that shocking loss to San Jose State last year. So, hopefully they're clicking at that time. And,
that'll be a big question because Steve Alford did tremendous at the conference tournament at New Mexico since he's come to Nevada, 2-4 at the Mountain West tournament. That's not a great record for the caliber of team that Nevada should have. That's always a really hard tournament to win. He's got history doing it, but early exit against Wyoming in his first year, early exit against San Jose State in his second year. So they have won a couple games, or most recently San Jose State. They have won a couple games in the Mountain West tournament, but hasn't necessarily been their forte. And if you're Nevada, you don't want to pin your hopes on we have to go win a Mountain West tournament.
Right.
You want to be as firmly in the field as possible before you head down to Thomas and Max, so you don't have that additional pressure. More than capable of winning it. But given kind of how the season's going right now, I feel like it's going to be a bubble team heading into the Mountain West tournament, which is always a little bit of an uneasy feeling for players and fans. But they've got some games to change that narrative. They've got 12 more games in the Mountain West season. If they go out there and they go somewhere around 9-3 over those last 12, they're probably pretty firmly in. That's not going to be easy to do. 9-3. There's still a lot of really difficult games on the schedule.